When powerful executive Victoria Crosswell exposes a rival's corruption, she doesn't just ignite a boardroom war. She unleashes a dangerous enemy who knows her darkest secret and will stop at nothing to destroy her. My name is Victoria Crosswell, and at 30 years old, I believed I had finally secured a place in this world where certainty could exist. By day, I was a software engineer, building systems and solving problems with logic and precision. But my true anchor, the one thing I thought would never fail me, was our family home in Burlington, Vermont. That house wasn't just timber and stone. It was the living vessel of my childhood laughter, the echo of my father's voice in the hallways, and the quiet comfort of nights spent working late into the glow of my computer. Over the years, I poured myself into it, fixing, repairing, painting, saving it from collapse. Every corner of it carried my fingerprint, my sacrifice. But anchors can be ripped away in a single moment. It happened over dinner. The clinking of forks, the faint scent of roasted chicken, the soft creak of the old ceiling fan above us. It had been an ordinary night, right up until my mother's fork slammed against the table like a thunderbolt. "You have 48 hours to gather your things and leave," she snapped, her voice cutting the air with ruthless finality. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, locked on mine. "This house belongs to your sister now." For a second, I thought I had misheard. The words didn't make sense. Across from me, my father never looked up from his plate. He didn't argue. He didn't defend me. His silence struck deeper than any weapon. And my sister? She wasn't even here. She was still in California, her life as polished and distant as always. She hadn't walked these floors in years, hadn't cared when the roof leaked, hadn't answered when the mortgage nearly crushed us. Yet suddenly, she was the chosen one, the rightful heir to a home I had single-handedly kept alive. The air thickened, pressing down on me like a storm. I looked around at the walls I had painted, the furniture I had bought, and the light fixtures I had carefully chosen. All of it seemed to turn against me, whispering the same cruel truth: "You don't belong here anymore." My mother's words burned in my ears. My father's silence stung even more. The betrayal was sharp and deliberate. The one who had given everything was being erased, while the one who had given nothing was crowned. I felt my chest tighten, my pulse thundering in my ears. There was no point in arguing. Words would fall on deaf ears. My sacrifices meant nothing to them. So I stood. Slowly, quietly, I pushed my chair back, its legs scraping across the hardwood floor like a blade. I turned without a word, walked down the hallway, and shut myself inside my bedroom. The lavender scent of last night's candles still lingered in the air, but the room felt colder now, stripped of its safety. I pressed my back against the door, clutching my phone in trembling hands. But I wasn't shaking out of fear. Something darker, sharper, was coursing through me. They thought I would accept this, that I would leave quietly, that I would surrender what was mine. They were wrong. I clenched my phone so tightly my knuckles whitened, my heart pounding like a drum of war. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to plan, methodically, silently, and with a precision they would never anticipate. In 48 hours, when my sister stepped foot into this house thinking it was hers, she would realize the truth. And when she did, she would wish she had never laid claim to it. The countdown had begun. The night stretched on, but sleep never came. I sat cross-legged on the edge of my bed, the dim glow of my desk lamp washing over stacks of receipts, contracts, and utility bills that I had saved over the years. Proof. Tangible proof that this house wasn't theirs, it was mine. Each paper carried a story. The roofing receipt from 2 summers ago, when I had worked double shifts at the tech firm just to pay for the repairs after a storm ripped half the shingles away. The contractor's invoice for rewiring the kitchen after I had stayed up night after night teaching myself extra coding languages to earn freelance money. Even the smallest bills, plumbing, paint, insulation, were reminders of my sacrifices. I wasn't just a tenant in this house. I was its guardian. But my mother had erased that with a single sentence. Her voice replayed in my mind. "This house belongs to your sister now." My sister, Caroline. The golden child. She had always been our parents' favorite, successful, glamorous, endlessly praised. She lived 3,000 miles away in California, too busy posting curated moments of her perfect life to notice our father's fading health or our mother's quiet bitterness. And yet, in one brutal decision, Caroline was rewarded for her absence. I remembered being 23 when the mortgage notice arrived like a death sentence. Our father's business had collapsed, my mother was drowning in debts, and Caroline had been unreachable, probably sipping cocktails in Los Angeles. I was the one who signed the papers, who shouldered the payments month after month, tightening my budget until there was nothing left but survival. And when the house creaked, when the pipes froze, when the foundation threatened to crack, I was the one who fought to hold it all together. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Crying was a weakness, and weakness had no place now. I pushed the stack of papers into a folder, sealing my evidence like a soldier packing ammunition. My phone buzzed against the nightstand. A text lit up the screen. From Caroline. Hey Vic, just heard the news. I'll be flying in soon. Can't wait to finally fix that old place up and make it livable again. Maybe even sell it. Anyway, see you soon. XO. My hand shook. Sell it? She wanted to erase everything I had built, everything I had saved. My sacrifices, my memories, turned into profit for her. The fury boiled, so hot it felt like electricity beneath my skin. I pressed the phone to my chest, breathing hard, forcing myself to think. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about identity, dignity, justice. And I wasn't about to let her waltz back into my life and take what was mine. A faint sound broke through my storm of thoughts, a floorboard creaking down the hallway. My father's uneven footsteps, slow and dragging. For a moment, I thought he might stop at my door. He didn't. He just shuffled past, silent, retreating into the room he now shared with my mother. That silence, his silence, hurt worse than Caroline's message. He had been my hero once. The man who taught me how to ride a bike, who built me a treehouse in the backyard. But tonight, he had sat there like a ghost while my mother cut me out of my own life. I felt the foundation of everything I believed in start to crack. The family I had trusted. The home I had preserved. Even the love I thought existed between us. It was all an illusion. I whispered into the stillness, my voice trembling but resolute. They've made their choice. Now I'll make mine. And in that moment, something inside me hardened. This wasn't going to be Caroline's victory. It wasn't going to be my mother's triumph. And it certainly wasn't going to be my father's silence that defined me. The house was mine, and I would fight for it by any means necessary. Morning light spilled across my bedroom floor, slicing through the blinds in sharp, golden lines. I hadn't slept. My mind had been a battlefield all night, anger and grief warring with calculation. But as the sun rose, so did my resolve. Caroline was coming.
Soon.
The thought of her gliding into the driveway with her sleek luggage and designer heels made my stomach twist. She would walk in as though she owned this house, her voice filling the hallways with false cheer, her smile polished for our parents. And they, like always, would beam at her, as if she were some savior returning from a noble quest. I wouldn't let that happen. Not without a fight. I moved to my desk, where my laptop waited. The screen glowed to life, and with it, my second identity. By day, I was the dependable software engineer. By night, I was something else, someone who understood how to unearth what people tried to keep buried. If Caroline thought she could take everything from me, I would take something back from her. I began searching bank filings, old employment records, even the trail of her online accounts. With enough persistence, every polished life revealed its cracks. And Caroline had plenty. A credit card statement that didn't match her declared income. A series of unpaid medical bills was tucked under her perfect exterior. A questionable business partner with lawsuits attached to his name. The deeper I dug, the more her California dream began to look like smoke and mirrors. A small, grim smile tugged at my lips. Caroline wasn't untouchable. She wasn't the golden child she pretended to be. She was fragile. And fragility was something I could use. But the plan wasn't complete yet. Information was power, yes, but timing was everything. If I revealed too much too soon, my parents would dismiss it, call me jealous or bitter. No, I needed to wait until the moment Caroline tried to set foot into this house, the moment she tried to claim what was mine. That's when the truth would shatter her. I closed the laptop, sliding it back under a pile of books, just as a knock rattled my door. "Victoria?" My mother's voice, sharp even through the wood. "Breakfast is ready." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not without letting her hear the fire in my voice. Another knock. This time softer, weaker. My father's. "Vic, please come out. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Harder? My laugh was bitter and silent. They had already made it unbearable. I stayed quiet until their footsteps faded. When the house returned to silence, I moved to the window. Outside, the maple trees swayed gently in the breeze, the same ones I had climbed as a child. The same ones that watched over me when I studied late into the night, when I patched holes in the roof, when I sat alone with my thoughts. This wasn't just a house. It was my history, my future, my identity. And if Caroline thought she could strip that away from me, she had underestimated me more than anyone ever had. I whispered into the morning air, a promise only the walls would hear. "When you walk through that door, Caroline, I'll be waiting." The growl of an engine shattered the afternoon silence. I was standing at the window when the silver Mercedes eased into the driveway, sunlight glinting off its polished hood. My stomach clenched. There she was, Caroline Crosswell, stepping out as if she'd never left, her designer sunglasses sliding down her nose, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Home sweet home," she sang, stretching her arms as if she were greeting her kingdom. The sight of her, so effortless and entitled, made my blood run hot. She hadn't lived here in years, hadn't scraped together pennies to keep this house alive. Yet she strutted up the walkway as though she had built every brick herself. The front door swung open before she could knock. My mother stood there, her face glowing with pride, arms wide. Caroline. Their embrace was long and theatrical, a performance meant to remind me who truly mattered in this family. My father appeared behind them, slower, weaker, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. And I stayed in the hallway, watching. Silent. Calculating. Caroline finally noticed me, her smile flickering with the faintest trace of disdain. "Victoria," she said, as though the name itself was inconvenient on her tongue. "It's been so long." "Not long enough," I replied, my voice cool, steady. Her laugh was light, but her eyes carried venom. She dropped her luggage in the entryway, letting it thud against the hardwood floor. "I can't wait to start making changes. The place looks, well, tired. But don't worry, I'll breathe new life into it." My jaw tightened. Funny. I thought breathing life into it was what I'd been doing for the past decade. Caroline's eyes narrowed just slightly. My mother shot me a warning look, but I didn't care. Dinner that night was unbearable. The table was set as though for a celebration. My mother poured wine, my father raised his glass, and Caroline filled the air with her stories. Parties in Los Angeles, meetings with producers, her grand plans for the future of our house. Sell it, renovate it, profit from it. Every word was a dagger. Finally, I couldn't stay silent. I set down my fork, the clink against porcelain echoing like a gunshot. "Tell me, Caroline," I said evenly. "Do your investors know about the lawsuits against your business partner?" The table went still. My mother froze mid-sip. My father's fork hovered in the air. Caroline's smile faltered, just for a second. "What are you talking about?" she said, her tone sharp but controlled. I leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. "The partner you've been working with, the one with a trail of unpaid debts and court summonses. Not exactly the kind of reputation you want tied to your shiny new projects, is it?" Caroline's glass trembled slightly as she set it down. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I let the question hang, savoring the silence. "Because I've seen the filings, the unpaid bills, the cracks in your perfect little empire. And if I've seen them, others will too." My mother's face hardened. Victoria, enough. This is not the time. But Caroline's mask had already slipped. For the first time, I saw fear flash in her eyes. She tried to recover, tried to plaster the smile back on, but the damage was done. I leaned back in my chair, calm, deliberate. You want to take this house from me? Fine. But you should be very careful about what you bring into it. Skeletons have a way of rattling when you least expect them. The silence was suffocating. My father cleared his throat, but no words came. My mother glared daggers at me. And Caroline simply stared, her knuckles white against the stem of her glass. The war had begun, and I wasn't going to lose. The morning after that dinner felt different. The air inside the house was heavy, charged, as though the walls themselves had absorbed every drop of tension. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the coffee pot as it sputtered and hissed. Caroline's laughter drifted faintly from the living room where she sat with our mother, sipping tea as though last night hadn't happened. Her voice was too loud, too bright, a performance for anyone willing to listen. But beneath it, I could hear the cracks. She was unsettled. I had rattled her, and she knew it. I poured my coffee and carried it back to my room. The house, once my sanctuary, now felt like a battlefield where every creak of the floorboards could signal an ambush. My father passed me in the hallway, his eyes downcast. He didn't speak, didn't even attempt to smile. His silence had grown louder than any words he might have offered. Closing my door, I set the mug on my desk and powered up my laptop. This wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about control. Caroline might have charmed our parents, but I had something she didn't: the truth and the skills to wield it. Her financial facade wasn't the only thing cracking. Her social world, the friends, the investors, the curated image she clung to could unravel if the right threads were pulled. I just needed to decide when and how. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You don't know what you've started. Stop digging, Vic, before you regret it. I froze, staring at the screen. My stomach dropped. This wasn't Caroline's voice, it was someone else's. Someone is protecting her. I typed a reply but deleted it before sending. My hands trembled as I locked the phone. If Caroline had people watching me, if she had others involved in this, then the battle was bigger than I thought. Still, a grim determination steadied me. If she wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. Later that day, I overheard her in the living room, her voice sharp as she spoke into her phone. No, it's fine, she hissed. She doesn't have proof. And even if she did, she wouldn't dare use it. She's too careful. Toots boring. A pause, then laughter. Don't worry. By the end of this week, this house is mine. My chest tightened, fury sparking. Careful? Boring? She had no idea who she was underestimating. That night, when the house was asleep, I crept back to my laptop. My fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of code spilling like ink. I wasn't just collecting information anymore, I was building a trap. By the time Caroline tried to claim this house as hers, I would have her secrets lined up like dominoes. And when I pushed the first one, her entire empire would collapse in front of everyone she thought adored her. But as I closed the laptop, the phone buzzed again. Another unknown message. You think you're in control, but you're not the only one with secrets. My pulse thundered in my ears. Someone was watching me. Someone who knew more than I realized. The war had entered a new phase. And this time, the battlefield was bigger than just the house. The next 2 days felt like walking through enemy territory. Caroline played the part of the charming daughter flawlessly. She followed our mother around the kitchen, chatting about recipes and renovations, making promises about paint colors and hardwood floors. My father trailed behind them, quiet as ever, nodding when prompted, fading into the background like a shadow. But I could see the undercurrent in Caroline's eyes. She wasn't here for family. She was here for conquest. And so was I. Late one afternoon, while she was out meeting an old friend, I slipped into the guest room where she had been staying. Her suitcase was half unzipped on the bed, silk clothes spilling out, perfume lingering in the air. But it was her laptop on the desk that drew me like a magnet. The screen was closed, but the faint warmth told me she'd been using it recently. I pressed the power button, and when the login screen appeared, I smiled. Caroline had always been predictable. Narcissism made people careless. A few quick attempts, and the password fell into place. Her own birthday. Typical. My fingers hovered as her files unfolded before me. Folders labeled investors, projects, and contracts. At first, it was exactly what I expected. Documents filled with bold promises, glossy presentations, and budgets that didn't quite add up. But then I found something stranger. A folder simply marked Crosswell. Inside were emails, dozens of them, but not between her and her business partners. Between her and someone much closer. My father. I scrolled, heart hammering. The messages were recent. His words were clipped, strained, but unmistakable. He had been feeding Caroline information about me, my routines, my finances, even my personal frustrations. The most recent email froze my breath. Victoria won't fight back. She doesn't have it in her. She's always been the quiet one. Just stay the course, Caroline. By the end of the week, the house will be yours. She'll leave. She won't dare risk a scene. My hands shook. My own father, my silent, broken father, wasn't just standing by. He was helping her. Betrayal sank into me like ice. Every memory of him teaching me to ride my bike, bandaging my scraped knees, carrying me on his shoulders at the fair. It all cracked, fell away, replaced by the cold truth of his treachery. The man I had once trusted most had chosen his favorite.
And it wasn't me.
I closed the laptop, careful to leave no trace. My reflection in the darkened screen looked different, harder, sharper. The last remnants of naivety drained away. If my father had chosen sides, so be it. But he had forgotten something. I wasn't the quiet one anymore. I slipped out of the room and down the hall, every step filled with new resolve. Caroline thought she had me cornered. My father thought I wouldn't fight. They were both about to learn how wrong they were. That evening, the four of us sat down for dinner again. The same table. The same silence stretched taut across the room. Only this time, I didn't feel like a cornered daughter. I felt like a predator waiting for her prey to step closer. Caroline chatted brightly about a new opportunity in California, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction. I might even bring some investors out here to see the place. They'll be impressed with how well it's held up. Imagine, Mom, the backyard could host events, charity galas, maybe even weddings. I clenched my fork so tightly it nearly bent. My home, our grandfather's home, reduced to a backdrop for her vanity. But I didn't let the rage show. Instead, I tilted my head and smiled just enough to make her uneasy. You should make sure the house is in your name before you start planning weddings. Investors tend to care about little details like ownership. Her eyes flickered. Just for a second. But I caught it. Don't be childish, Victoria, my mother snapped, glaring at me over her wine glass. We've already made the decision. Caroline will manage this property responsibly. Unlike you, who still treats it like a hobby project. I swallowed the venom rising in my throat. They still thought I was harmless. They thought I would whine, sulk, maybe cry, then vanish quietly. But I had already set things in motion. Earlier that afternoon, after leaving Caroline's laptop untouched but unlocked in my memory, I had made a call. Green Mountain movers would be arriving tomorrow morning, not to take my things this time, but to deliver a few items I had strategically purchased: an old, scratched desk, mismatched dining chairs, and a set of heavy, outdated curtains. They weren't valuable, but they looked like junk. Junk that appeared permanent. I wanted Caroline to think I was stripping the house of everything useful while leaving behind garbage. A petty move, yes. But it was the surface of a much deeper plan. Actually, I said calmly, setting my fork down, I've been sorting through the old family records. Grandfather's papers, receipts, and even the mortgage documents. It's fascinating, the things you find when you dig deep enough. That did it. Caroline's fork paused midair. My father's shoulders stiffened. I didn't realize you cared about paperwork, Caroline said, forcing a laugh. That's usually my arena. I leaned back, meeting her eyes across the table. You'd be surprised what belongs in mine. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the clink of my mother's glass against the table. My father avoided my gaze, pretending to study his plate, but his jaw twitched. He knew what I'd found, or at least he feared I did. And that fear was exactly what I wanted. After dinner, I excused myself, retreating to my room. But instead of sleeping, I spread out documents across my desk. Receipts for the $80,000 I had poured into the mortgage, proof of repairs, bank statements, and tucked safely in a folder Kristen had handed me earlier that day, the copy of my grandfather's will, naming me the sole heir. The trap was simple. I would let Caroline believe she was close to victory, let her strut through the house like a queen. And then, when she least expected it, I would bring everything crashing down in front of them all. But traps required patience. And patience had never been my sister's strength. I closed the folder, my lips curving into a thin smile. Tomorrow, Caroline would walk into a home filled with mismatched junk and empty walls, convinced I had already surrendered. And while she celebrated, I would be tightening the noose. The boardroom was silent except for the faint ticking of the antique clock mounted on the far wall. Its rhythmic sound drilled into Victoria Crosswell's mind like a countdown, each tick reminding her of how little time she had left to turn the tide. At the head of the table, Adrian Steele's posture was unshakable, his fingers loosely interlaced, eyes gleaming with quiet triumph. His confidence wasn't loud, but it was insidious, the kind of presence that made everyone else doubt themselves. Victoria's chest tightened as she laid out her evidence. Screens illuminated with charts, email threads, and financial inconsistencies, all pointing to Adrian's manipulations. The room of executives leaned forward, their skepticism wavering. "Here," she said firmly, tapping the glowing projection, "are the discrepancies in the offshore accounts. Money siphoned, masked as operational expenses. And here," she swiped to the next slide, her hand trembling but voice steady, "the falsified correspondence implicating my leadership. Every shred of it orchestrated." A murmur swept across the room. Some executives whispered to one another, while others stared at Adrian, searching for cracks in his armor. Adrian finally leaned back, his smile sharp and deliberate. "Compelling presentation, Victoria," he said smoothly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "But you've always been dramatic. Screenshots, documents, they can be doctored. Desperation makes for sloppy evidence." Gasps rippled. Adrian was deflecting, twisting her truth into suspicion. Victoria's nails dug into her palm beneath the table. Rage simmered under her composure, but she steadied herself. This wasn't just about exposing him. It was about survival. "You want proof beyond the paper trail?" she asked, lifting her gaze directly into his. "Then listen carefully." She tapped the final file. The audio recording began to play, Adrian's unmistakable voice echoing across the room. His cold tone filled the air, discussing redirecting company funds, scapegoating Victoria, and consolidating power before she could move. The executive stiffened. A few turned pale. The evidence was no longer on paper. It was alive in the room, undeniable. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he clapped slowly, deliberately. "Impressive," he said. "But selective recordings prove nothing. Where's the full context?" He rose from his chair, looming over the table like a predator. "She'll say anything to protect her crumbling legacy." The room fractured into chaos, executives arguing, phones buzzing, loyalties wavering. Victoria's heart pounded. She had landed her strike, but Adrian wasn't falling. If anything, he was adapting, spinning webs faster than she could cut them. And then, as if twisting the knife, Adrian's gaze shifted directly to her. His words, calm but deadly, silenced the room. "Careful, Victoria. You think you've cornered me, but you're not the only one with secrets." Her stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" one executive demanded, eyes flicking between them. Adrian's lips curved into a smile that chilled her blood. "Let's just say Victoria Crosswell isn't the woman you think she is. And when I'm finished, she'll wish she'd never set foot in this room." The room erupted again. Whispers, gasps, shifting eyes. Victoria felt her world teeter. The evidence was strong, but Adrian had just shifted the battleground. He was about to weaponize something deeper, something personal. For the first time, her composure cracked. Because she knew, whatever Adrian was about to unleash, it wasn't fabricated. It was something real, something she had buried, something that could shatter everything. And in that moment, she realized, Adrian wasn't just fighting for control of the company. He was fighting to destroy her. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside Victoria Crosswell's chest. Rain battered against the glass walls of the conference room as though the sky itself sought entry into the chaos within. Adrian's steel stood tall, his silhouette cut sharp against the lightning flickering in the distance. His calmness was venomous, every syllable he uttered dripping with the certainty of someone who believed the battlefield was his. "Secrets," Adrian said, pacing slowly, his voice low and deliberate. "They have a way of clawing to the surface, when you least expect them." Victoria's pulse hammered. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to stay composed, but a tremor betrayed her hands beneath the table. She locked eyes with him, unwilling to bow to his intimidation. "What exactly are you implying?" asked Charles Wyndham, one of the more skeptical board members. His voice was sharp, though tinged with unease. Adrian smirked. "Our dear Victoria isn't the untainted visionary she pretends to be. While she plays the martyr, championing integrity and loyalty, she's been hiding a chapter of her past so scandalous it would make headlines scream for weeks." Gasps whispered around the room like wind through dry leaves. Victoria's throat tightened. She knew what he was hinting at, though she had spent years burying it beneath layers of silence and distance. It wasn't a crime, but it was something that could be spun into a weapon if handled by a man like Adrian. Adrian continued, circling the room as though delivering a sermon. "Tell them, Victoria. Or should I? Tell them about your little indiscretion. The one that forced you to leave New York so abruptly. The one you thought no one would ever dig up." Her blood ran cold. Adeline Hart, one of the younger executives, leaned forward, brows furrowed. "Is this true, Victoria?" Victoria inhaled sharply, forcing her voice to remain steady. "What Adrian is suggesting is a distortion. A piece of my past twisted to look like a scandal. He wants you to believe it undermines everything I've built here." Adrian's laughter was soft, mocking. "Twisted? Or is it the truth?" He pulled a folder from his leather briefcase and tossed it onto the table. The paper spilled like a wound tearing open. Blurred photos, fragments of letters, a handful of legal documents. The room went silent. All eyes darted between the scattered papers and Victoria's pale face. She stared at the mess on the table, ghosts of a life she had fled from. Her heart clenched with an ache that wasn't just fear, but grief. Because she knew this wasn't just about discrediting her professionally. Adrian was digging into wounds that had once nearly broken her. He leaned in close, his voice for her ears alone, though the room strained to listen. "I told you, Victoria. You're not the only one who knows how to play with fire." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The balance of power in the room teetered on the edge, waiting to see how she would respond. Victoria knew this was no longer just a fight for her position or her reputation. This was a fight for her very identity, and she would either have to confront the truth head-on or watch Adrian burn her entire life to ash. The scattered documents lay on the polished oak table like shrapnel. Each paper seemed louder than the rain pounding the glass, louder than the murmurs rippling through the boardroom. Victoria's pulse thundered in her ears. She could feel the weight of every stare pressing against her, demanding answers, demanding explanations. Adrian didn't rush. He leaned back, watching her squirm, savoring every second of the unraveling. "Go on," he murmured, his lips curling into a wolfish grin. "Be honest with them. Unless you'd rather I continue the story myself?" The room tilted between silence and suspicion. Victoria inhaled slowly, anchoring herself to the storm outside. She would not crumble. Not here, not in front of him. "Fine," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice through the noise. "If you want the truth, you'll get it. But you'll get it from me, not from him." Her gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of the people whose votes would soon decide her fate. Years ago, in New York, I was caught in a relationship that ended disastrously. It wasn't just personal, it bled into professional life. Lines blurred. Mistakes were made. But it was not corruption, and it was not fraud. The whispers rose, then fell. Some executives softened, while others still looked wary. Adrian struck like a serpent. Mistakes, he echoed. You call falsifying records for someone you loved a mistake? Her heart jolted. He was pushing deeper, twisting the knife. That's a lie, she snapped, her voice trembling with suppressed fury. Yes, I trusted the wrong man. Yes, I was misled. But I never compromised my integrity. I never profited from it. When it came to light, I left, because staying would have meant becoming a pawn in someone else's game. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and raw. For the first time since this nightmare began, she was no longer fighting for optics. She was fighting with honesty. Adrian's smirk faltered. Just a fraction, but she saw it. He had wanted shame, denial, collapse. Instead, she was standing straighter, reclaiming the narrative inch by inch. Charles Wyndham leaned back, folding his arms. So this scandal Adrian's been waving around, he said slowly, was a personal failing, not a professional crime? Yes, Victoria answered firmly. It was human, painful, and I've spent every day since proving my worth through transparency and relentless work. If you want to judge me, do it on what I've built here, not on the ghosts Adrian digs up to serve his ambition. The room fell into uneasy silence again. Adrian's jaw tightened, his grip on the game slipping. But then his eyes narrowed, cold and calculating, as he whispered, You think you've won by confessing? You think they'll see strength in your vulnerability? He straightened, his voice rising for all to hear. No, Victoria. What they see is weakness. And weakness doesn't survive in this world. The storm outside howled as though punctuating his threat. Victoria steadied her breath. This was no longer just about surviving the meeting. It was about surviving Adrian. And she wasn't sure which battlefield would claim her first, the boardroom, or the war he was promising to drag her into beyond it. The storm outside roared like a beast unleashed, rattling the glass as though it too wanted in on the carnage. Inside, the tension was suffocating. Adrian's steel didn't sit, he prowled. Every step, every measured glance at the executive screamed control. But beneath his calm, Victoria sensed it, a current of desperation. Do you think this ends with a sob story about lost love and poor judgment? Adrian sneered.
No.
That was the appetizer. The main course, he pulled a small black envelope from his jacket and laid it flat on the table, is what she's been hiding all along. Victoria's stomach plummeted. She knew what was in that envelope. She had prayed it would never resurface, that the past would stay buried beneath miles and years. Adrian's smile widened. A lockbox of secrets. And I'm the one holding the key. He slid the envelope toward Charles Wyndham, who hesitated before opening it. Outspilled photographs, grainy, yet damning. Victoria was in a boardroom years ago, not here but in New York. Seated beside a man whose name alone still haunted her, Daniel Carrington, the disgraced investment mogul whose empire had collapsed in scandal. Gasps rippled through the room. Adrian's voice was silk and poison. While the world burned from Carrington's schemes, who was right there at his side. Our own Victoria Crosswell. Advisor. Confidant, perhaps more? The insinuation hung in the air like smoke. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. She remembered those days. The late-night meetings, the half-formed promises, the intoxicating pull of Daniel's charm before she learned the truth of his corruption. She had walked away before the collapse, before the investigations tore his empire apart. But photographs told no timeline. They only painted the implication. That's not the whole story, Victoria said sharply, rising to her feet. Her palms were sweating, but her voice carried steel. Yes, I was there. Yes, I was close to Daniel Carrington. But when I realized what he was, I left. I cut every tie. I refused to play a part in his empire of lies. Convenient, Adrian said, eyes glinting. But photographs don't lie. You were there. And now everyone can see it. The executives exchanged uneasy glances. Some averted their eyes, unwilling to judge, while others looked at her with suspicion, as though they couldn't separate her from Carrington's ghost. Adeline Hart spoke softly, almost to herself. If this is true, then she's been carrying this secret for years. Victoria's chest tightened. The walls were closing in. Adrian had her cornered, weaponizing half-truths into shackles. But then something unexpected stirred inside her. Not fear, not despair, defiance. She leaned forward, meeting the gaze of every executive in turn.
Yes.
I kept it buried. Because it was painful. Because I wanted to be judged for who I am, not for the mistakes of my past. But make no mistake, hiding it was not weakness. It was survival. I have spent every day proving that I am more than one chapter of my history. The storm thundered outside, as if underscoring her words. Adrian, however, wasn't finished. His smirk returned, colder than before. And yet, Victoria, the past has a way of poisoning the present. Maybe you walked away. Maybe you didn't. But even if you did, the question remains. He leaned across the table, his voice dropping to a razor's whisper that sliced through the silence. Did you leave Carrington behind because you saw his corruption, or because he saw through you? The boardroom froze. Victoria's heart stopped. Because in that question, Adrian wasn't just accusing her of complicity. He was accusing her of being the mastermind. And for the first time, she felt the room's faith in her teeter dangerously close to collapse. The silence was suffocating. The boardroom felt smaller, the storm outside hammering against the windows as though demanding entry to witness the collapse. Adrian Steele's accusation hung in the air like poison. Did you leave Carrington, or did Carrington leave you? Executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Suspicion had turned into doubt, and doubt was turning into something far more dangerous: fear. Victoria Crosswell stood frozen for a heartbeat, her lungs refusing to fill. Adrian's words had been designed to kill in silence, to let paranoia do the work for him. But then something inside her hardened. She straightened, shoulders squared, eyes blazing. Enough, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. You think you can weaponize half-truths and shadows against me?
No.
I will not be defined by the fragments you twist. She turned to the board, her voice fierce but steady. Yes, I was with Daniel Carrington. I believed in him, in what I thought he stood for. I was wrong. When I discovered the rot beneath his empire, I didn't cling to him. I didn't stay silent. I left. Because I would not be complicit. Because integrity mattered more than power. The words struck the air with conviction. Some executives leaned forward, drawn to her fire, while others hesitated, their eyes darting to Adrian. Adrian chuckled darkly. A beautiful speech. But you expect them to take your word over mine? Over the evidence I've gathered. He swept his hand toward the scattered documents. Words are wind, Victoria. Proof is what matters. Victoria locked eyes with him, a glimmer of defiance flickering in her gaze. Then let's talk about proof. She reached into her bag, calm, deliberate, and pulled out a slim silver flash drive. The room seemed to lean toward it instinctively. This, she said, holding it up, is the full archive of my communications with Carrington. Every email, every message, every document I preserved before I walked away. Unedited. Unaltered. It shows when I cut ties, how I reported my suspicions to authorities, and how I fought to keep my name out of his collapse. Gasps rippled around the table. Adrian's smirk faltered. You see, she continued, her voice rising, I've lived with the fear of this moment for years. I kept the archive not because I was guilty, but because I knew men like you would try to twist my silence into complicity. Well, not today. She handed the flash drive to Charles Wyndham. He inserted it into the system, and within seconds, the screen filled with a torrent of correspondence. Dates, times, messages, a trail of truth so meticulous it dismantled Adrian's narrative in real time. The executives whispered, their doubt shifting, breaking apart under the weight of clarity. Adrian's face hardened, the predator stripped of his prey. He slammed his hand on the table. This doesn't change the fact that you concealed it, that you ran from it. Victoria turned to him, her eyes burning. No, Adrian. I didn't run. I rebuilt. And that's what terrifies you. You thrive on destruction, but I rise from it. That's why you'll never win. The boardroom erupted, voices clashing, debates rising, but the tide was clear. The balance of power had shifted. Adrian no longer looked like the architect of victory. He looked cornered. Charles Wyndham rose, his tone decisive. We've heard enough. Adrian, your accusations have collapsed under scrutiny. Victoria has been transparent, resilient, and unflinching in the face of your attacks. My vote of confidence is with her. Others echoed in agreement, one after another. The momentum was undeniable. Adrian's jaw clenched, his mask cracking. He leaned toward Victoria, his voice a venomous whisper. You may have won this round, but you've exposed yourself. And trust me, the world is far less forgiving than this room. Victoria met his stare, unwavering. Let it come. I've already survived worse. The storm outside broke at last, rain softening into silence. Inside, the board declared their decision. Victoria would remain, her leadership affirmed. Adrian was stripped of influence, his schemes crumbling around him. Yet as the meeting dissolved, Victoria felt no triumph. Only a lingering chill. Adrian's threat wasn't empty. He was too dangerous for that. She stood by the window, watching the storm clouds drift apart, her reflection staring back at her. She had survived the fire. But survival, she knew, was not the end. It was only the beginning. And in the depths of her chest, she understood one truth with terrifying clarity. Adrian Steele would be back. And next time, he wouldn't just come for her career. He would come for everything.